Everybody should really pay attention to their bodies. Yoga is not about trying to accomplish something. It's really about trying to feel and be in your own body. And today I really want our intention to be just gratitude for being able to take this time at the end of a busy day, and sometimes a stressful day, to take care of ourselves and to thank ourselves and thank our bodies. There's something inherently good in you that had you sign up for yoga tonight and actually follow through with it. So as you get onto your yoga mat, thank yourself for that inner goodness. So we're going to come to a tabletop position, and then we're going to just start to walk the hands back towards the knees to sink the hips towards the heels. Now, some of our knees don't bend this deeply, so you can always put a rolled towel or blanket behind your knees, or you can just keep your hips a little bit higher. But once you get to that point where your hips are as far back as they're going to go, then walk your hands forward. Bring your head down between your arms, and you're in child's pose. And just feeling that gentle competition between the belly and the thighs here. Maybe even noticing how the back is stretching here. We're going to keep the elbows off the floor and just keep finger walking your hands a little further forward as you keep drawing the hips back to whatever degree is comfortable for you. And now lift your palms, but keep your fingertips and your thumbs connected to the mat or the floor. And then walk both hands over to the right. It's likely your right hand will come off the mat. Your left hand might be on the right edge of the mat or so. And then once you're there, just kind of shift your hips side to side, just an inch or two. And notice that when you shift your hips a little bit more to the left, you get a little bit more of an opening through the whole left side of the body. And then what you're feeling stretching might be obliques or your rib cage muscles, the intercostal muscles. We also have these muscles in the side back. They're called quadratus lumborum muscles, or QLs for short. They help to keep your torso above your hips all day long. So you might really feel like they deserve this extra TLC. Good. Now walk both hands back onto the mat and over to the left this time. And then your right hand could be on the left edge of the mat, or it might come off the mat with the left hand. And then again, just kind of shifting your hips side to side, wiggling around. You get to decide the variation of the shape for your body. So it's never about making the perfect yoga pose or accomplishing the perfect yoga pose. It's about making the yoga pose perfect for your body. So that might require a little bit of adjusting, maybe a little backing off. And now let's walk both hands back onto the mat. Once your hands are even with your shoulders straight ahead, plant your palms again. Let's lift the hips away from the heels. And then from here, we're going to come into what I call a half down dog. It's called puppy pose a lot of times, or heart melting pose. So your hands can come right up to the front edge of the mat. And then your knees are going to walk back a little bit. So it's like an extended hands and knees pose. And then you'll shift your hips back enough that they're right over your knees. If you didn't take enough distance between the hands and knees, you might end up in sort of almost like a modified child's pose. So we want to take the knees back far enough that when we bring the hips back, they're right over the knees. And then your head can drop down between your arms again. I like to keep the elbows lifted. Your head might even touch the floor. But with the elbows lifted, this almost mimics a downward facing dog. So this is a nice alternative for those of us that don't want to spend a lot of time in down dog. You could spend time in a half down dog. And then from here, we're going to drop the elbows onto the floor and then just kind of slide through to bring our hips and our thighs down onto the mat, coming into a mini back bend here. So this is our Sphinx pose. It is a variation of Cobra, or a Bhujangasana in Sanskrit. What I want you to do is really press down through the tops of your feet and see if you can lift the front of the thighs up away from the floor. And then the other thing I want you to do is lift your navel up away from the floor and try to bring your bottom ribs forward. So the bottom ribs are moving forward. You can carve a little tiny line in the air with the nose, gazing out towards the baseboards. But if that bothers your neck, then just look down between your thumbs or your index fingers. While you're here, you're pulling back on your elbows, almost like you're trying to slither through, but you're not. So keep those front of the thighs lifted, keep the feet rooted down. It helps to even push into the pinky toe side of your feet here. And this is a great counter pose to all that time you spend again at your computer or behind the wheel of your car. Pretty much everything we do is in front of us, so this helps to open us up. See if you can broaden your collarbones a little bit here and keep bringing the ribs forward. Move the shoulder blades down the back. Let's take one more nice deep breath here. Good. Now take your gaze down between your thumbs, curl your toes under, and see if you can lift your hips and thighs off the floor. We'll just spend about 3 breaths in a forearm plank. So if this is a little strenuous, you can always bring your knees down and do a different variation, right? A variation that's appropriate for your body. Shoulders are on the back. Let's take one more breath where we're at. Good. And then go ahead and release your thighs and your hips back down, point your toes, and then just cross your arms at the front of the mat. Rest your forehead on your crossed arms. Bend your knees and sway your legs side to side. This is just a nice release, a little thank you for the core holding us up in that plank pose for a few breaths. And bring your legs back to center, bring your feet back down onto the floor, and then when you're ready, lift your head up away from your arms. Bring your hands under your shoulders, and then push yourself back up to a tabletop position. You can kind of reposition yourself so you feel stable and ready for the next thing. We're going to bring both hands over towards the right edge of the mat and then step your left foot forward. So I was doing kind of opposite. So our left foot's going to come forward. We're setting up in a low lunge. Now, if you didn't bring your left foot far enough forward, it might look something like this, and your left knee might come out over your left foot. So in that case, we want to bring that right knee back a little bit. So as you sink into your hips, your left knee is right over that left ankle. And then just start to walk your hands towards the front of the mat. Bring your left hand outside your left foot, right hand inside the left foot, and then try to draw your left hip crease back as you sink down into your hips. So oftentimes when we come into our lunge, our tush kind of swings out. So we want to draw that left hip crease back as we sink down into the hips. And what you're getting is a nice little hip flexor stretch for that back leg, your right leg right now, as you're sinking into the left knee. If your knee is bothering you, I think it helps to push down into the knuckles of the toes and root down. You can even kind of peel the tips of the toes off the floor. That puts a little energy around that joint. Good. Now from here, we're going to keep the right hand on the floor. Left hand can either come onto the left knee, onto the left hip, or you can take that left arm up into the air. You can take your gaze down, forward, or up towards that left hand, whatever works for you and your neck. But we want to make sure that the neck stays lined up with the rest of the spine. So try not to let your right ear drop towards your right shoulder. Just stay nice and extended here. And again, this is not about accomplishing anything. Just find a variation where you can just be grateful for your body moving the way it is, breathing the way it is, circulating blood flow the way it is, right? Good. Now go ahead and put that left hand on the floor and then bring both hands onto your left knee. Let's just pause there for a moment. And usually we've got to get our sea legs. So focusing your gaze forward, finding a gazing spot helps to steady you, and then hugging your hips. So it helps to kind of squeeze the glutes a little bit. And now swim your arms around behind you and interlace your fingers. If clasping your hands behind you doesn't work, you can always put your hands on your low back, right? And then just draw the elbows back. So if you've got your hands clasped, squeeze the fingers together and try to pull your hands apart. And then instead of pinching your shoulder blades on the back, see if you can slide your shoulder blades downward as you just move the hands out a little bit. And again, if you're doing the other variation, you're still trying to slide your shoulder blades down the back. And I'm just keeping the gaze straight forward. You don't have to look up here. This is still a little mini back bend and a lovely counter pose to our daily life. We stay in the pose a few breaths so that we can really get the essence of the sensations that come up. And then we'll slowly release the hands, bring them back down onto the mat. And now bring your left hand inside your left foot and start to shift your hips back. Walk your hands back towards your right knee and roll onto your left heel. Again, there's a tendency to kind of shift the hips to one side or the other. So just make sure your right hip is right over your right knee and your left leg is directly out in front of your left hip. And then as you flex your toes up towards the sky, you'll probably become aware of some sensation in the back of this left leg. This is a variation of our half splits pose in yoga. Some of us might think of it as like a runner's stretch. It's, again, just a lovely way to release tension from the back. So while you're here, you're kind of shifting your hips back. And if you had a tail, you'd try to untuck the tail instead of tucking it down. And that means the belly might drop down a little bit and your chest is coming forward, almost like when we were in our Sphinx pose. Good. Now we're going to walk the hands forward. And then I'm going to bring the left hand back outside that left foot just for a little stability. We're going to curl the right toes under, lift the right knee off the floor. So this is like a high version of our lunge. The right hand's going to stay down. The left arm's going to circle out and up again. Or left hand could come onto the left knee or onto the left hip. So there's all sorts of variations. Again, make it perfect for your body. Looking wherever it's comfortable for your neck. But again, try to keep your neck nice and long. Crown of the head is lengthening away from that tailbone. And then we'll exhale and bring that left hand down. As you inhale, I want you to try to lift your hips up into the air and just press that right heel back, not down. It probably won't make it to the floor, but you're pressing that right heel back. Your head comes down towards the floor. You don't need to lock up your knees. Think about just lifting your hips into the air and pushing the front of the thighs into the back of the thighs. You can dive your head down if that's comfortable. If you have yoga props, you can always use those alongside your foot to add a little height to the floor. Thick books work really well at home, right? My husband reads Shelby Foote. Some of those books are really thick. They're almost as thick as a yoga block, so you could use those. Good. Now from here, just soften the bend in that left knee and step your right foot forward. Now it might take a couple steps, that's fine. Once your feet are together at the front of your mat, dive your head down towards the floor. Please bend your knees. Bend your knees so that your belly and your thighs can be friends again, just like when we were in child's pose. So let them make friends. Let your head hang. And now lift your hips into the air. You don't have to straighten the legs, right? This is about releasing tension in the back, not trying to create more of it. So just let the head hang and let the hips lift up. Fingertips can dangle above the floor, they can touch the floor, and again, you could use your thick books or yoga props alongside your feet. We'll take a couple more breaths here. Good. Now, I'm going to have you bring your hands to the shins, right below your knees, and then push your hands into your shins. Bring your head and your chest and your belly away from your thighs. Lengthen the crown of the head forward and extend your legs as much as you can. Now, if hands on the shins doesn't work, you can always bring your hands higher, right? Try to make your back like a tabletop again. So lengthening the spine, lifting the navel just ever so slightly so you're aware of your core strength. Good. And now from here, we're going to transition the hands onto the thighs, right above the knees. Sink your hips back as if there's a chair behind you, and then lift your chest up away from your thighs again. So the crown of the head is being pulled up as you sink your hips down. Bring your hands together in front of your chest in a prayer position, what we call Anjali Mudra. So I like doing this. I know we can do chair pose with our arms extended up overhead or out forward, but with the hands at the heart, your thumbs pressing into the chest, I want you to focus on lifting your heart, broadening those collarbones again. Lovely counter pose to our daily life. Now, look down at your knees. If you don't see your toes on the other side of your knees, move your hips back a little bit. Sink back into your heels. Wiggle your toes. Yeah, one more nice deep breath here. And then let's just inhale and stand up. Finding mountain pose. Now, you can keep your feet about hip distance apart in your mountain pose, Or if you're comfortable putting your feet together, you can. I find there's a little bit more wobbling that happens when we try to do that. So I like to keep the feet about hip distance apart. We want the tailbone lengthening down, navel drawing in, shoulders on the back. Once again, we've got the thumbs as a little reference for the heart to lift into. And the crown of the head is lifting up towards the sky, just like the mountain tries to lift through the clouds all the way to the sun. We'll take a couple breaths here. Sometimes when we're feeling a little scattered, especially at the end of a busy day, just standing in mountain pose, pressing both feet into the floor, feeling the aliveness of the body can bring a little gratitude for having just gotten through the day, right? For still feeling all of these sensations, for breathing, for being like a mountain, being resilient, strong. All right, sink your hips back again. If you have your feet together, you might want to separate the feet so they're about hip distance apart. Come back into your chair pose. So there's that tendency to kind of fall forward. So lift your chest, sink back into your hips, and then lengthen your tailbone down so you feel that core kick in while you're here. Again, maybe just check the knees. Make sure you can still see your toes wiggling down there. Good. One more nice deep breath in Utkatasana, chair pose. And now exhale your hands onto your thighs. Start to extend your legs as you slide your hands back to your shins. Lengthen the crown of your head forward. And we're back in that Ardha Uttanasana, the half forward fold. Like a tabletop here. Hips are lifted, navel's lifting, ribs are moving forward, shoulders on the back, crown of the head's lengthening away from the tail. And now slide your hands down your legs, bend your knees as much as you need to touch the floor. Hang your head. This is our full forward fold. Forward fold isn't you locking up your knees and wishing you could touch your toes. Forward fold is hinging from the hips, hips lifted, belly might meet the thighs. Yeah, I'm just making friends. That's okay. Good. Now keep your hands on the floor. So again, if you are using blocks, you can use blocks too for a little extra stability, but make sure your hands are down. We're going to step the left foot back. Bring the left knee down, and we're in a low lunge on the other side. So if, by some stroke you ended up in doing the right side before, just make sure you've got the other foot forward. So I'm doing my right side. Hopefully you are too. We'll start with both hands inside this right foot and just draw your right hip crease back. Make sure as you sink as deeply as you can into your hips that your right knee doesn't go beyond this right ankle. So a lot of times if we don't take that back knee back far enough, then we kind of ended up like this. Your knee might tolerate that today, tomorrow, but over time it's not going to like that. So I like to make sure our knees stay happy and safe. So, and again, if your knee's cranky with your knee over the ankle, make sure you're rooting down into the knuckles of the toes and just kind of peel the tips of the toes off the mat a little bit instead of, the toes kind of turn white sometimes when we curl them into the mat. So there we feel nice and stable. Now, reposition your right hand outside your right foot, left hand inside the right foot. And then right hand can either come up to your right knee, onto your right hip, or we can take that right hand up towards the ceiling. And again, you can look wherever it's comfortable for you. We're rotating the torso, so it helps to harness the core muscles, recruit the core muscles, and ask them to help you turn your navel to the right. And we'll take about 2 more breaths here. So again, just spending a little time in the pose to feel the sensations. Good, now we're going to exhale. Go ahead and bring that right hand down. And now slowly transition your hands on up to that right knee. Take a moment to get your sea legs. Soften your gaze forward. It helps to just fix your gaze on something that's not moving. So if the screen is right in front of you, kind of look over it and try to find something in the room that's not moving. Draw your right hip crease back, left hip crease forward, squeeze your glutes. So the buttocks muscles are working. They're the biggest muscles in our body, so we might as well use them, right? Now, I've got my back toes curled under because on this knee that just feels better, but you can also push the top of your foot into the floor. Sometimes we can even get light on that back knee by doing that and kind of feeling the front of that thigh lift a little bit. Awesome. Now we're going to swim the arms around behind us. Again, you can either bring your hands onto your hips, your low back, or you can interlace your fingers with me. This is our yoga mudra arms, right? So again, we want to try to draw the shoulder blades down. Try pulling your hands apart like they're stuck together or super glued together. If you've got your hands on your hips, keep the elbows moving back, but try to slide the shoulder blades down the back instead of just pinching them. And then keep the gaze just straight forward. And that will help to steady you. We're still lifting the chest towards the chin, lifting the heart. We're still breathing. And there might be a little sway, a little wobble. What happens when that happens? You just engage those glutes a little bit more, right? Activate some other muscles. All right, slowly release. We'll bring the hands back to the floor. And now from here, bring your right hand inside your right foot and then shift your weight back, bringing your hands back towards that left knee as you roll onto your right heel. Right toes are flexed towards the sky. Again, try not to let your hips swing to the right or left, but just go straight back. It almost feels like your right heel is super glued to the mat and you're trying to pull it back. You'll feel a nice stretch. If you're not feeling a stretch, you can always go a little further in, right? And just kind of dive in. Try to stick your tail out behind you. Bring your belly and your chest down and forward. And if you're feeling too much of a stretch, again, you don't have to lock up that knee. You can always use height underneath your hands. Good, now we're going to go ahead and walk forward, plant that right foot, bring your right hand back outside your right foot, curl your left toes under and lift that left knee off the floor. So we're back in that high lunge, right? So just taking a moment here to get all the muscles working, find your sea legs, left hand stays down, right hand comes up, either onto the right knee, onto the right hip, or reaching towards the ceiling. Once again, recruit those core muscles to turn the torso to the right. Deep breaths in and out. Feel the aliveness of your body. Try not to sag into that left hip. Fire up the front of that left thigh. And now we'll exhale to bring the right hand down. All right, so from here, we're gonna use our inhale to extend that right leg. And really what you're doing is just extending. We're not straightening it, right? You're making it just a little longer. Lift that right hip up. Press your left heel back. It's likely the left heel will not come to the floor. This is a modified version of our pyramid pose, or just a different variation. I really like this variation. But if you need to add height to your hands, add height to your hands. If you need to keep a slight bend in the front knee, keep a slight bend in the front knee. One more nice deep breath here. Good, let's go ahead and bend back into that right knee. And now we're gonna pick the right foot up off the floor and drag it back so it's at the back of the mat with the left foot. And we're in downward facing dog now. So you're making an upside down V shape with your body. Lifting the hips, pressing the heels back. Your feet are hip distance apart. The outer edges of your feet are parallel with the long edges of the mat. Fan your fingers out and try to root down into your fingertips, as well as the knuckles of your hands, the thumb pads and the thumb knuckles as well. Keep lifting the hips up, broaden your shoulders. Try not to pinch the shoulder blades together on the back. Lift the navel up. You might even feel like your hips go a little bit higher. Now, if you're feeling a lot of tightness in the back of the legs, alternate bending your knees a few times. And then remember, if this pose isn't working for you, you've got the puppy pose or even child's pose as a nice variation, an alternative. Do what's perfect for your body. We'll take one more breath in our down dog or puppy or even our child's pose. Good, and then let's bring the knees back down to the mat. We're just going to take a few moments here at the end of our yoga practice for Shavasana. Shavasana is considered the final relaxation pose. It's like the pinnacle pose of our yoga practice. So stay on your backs, close your eyes, and allow your breath to simply come in and go out. While you rest, your body is assimilating all the benefits of the poses that you've done. And your mind gets drawn into this state of ease and relaxation along with your body. So for that to happen, you just have to let go, surrender. Any busyness in the mind, let it just be there, like it's a conversation happening outside the room. Any sensations that are still present in the body, just let them come and go, like the breath comes in and breath goes out. At the sound of the singing bowl, just start to notice other sounds around you. Maybe there's sounds coming across on this video stream. And as you start to return back into your evening, do it very slowly and gently, taking with you the benefits of this yoga practice, the strength, the balance, the gratitude. Wiggle your fingers and your toes to start out. And then start to add some movements in your hands and your feet, rotating the wrists, rotating the ankles. And then start to stretch and move in other ways that feel intuitive and natural for you. One thing you could do is take deep breaths in and out to stretch your rib cage, to stretch your lungs. It might even feel good to yawn or sigh when you take those deep breaths in. And then to transition slowly upright, draw your knees in towards your chest, and this time roll over either onto your right or left side. Kind of curl up in a fetal-like position on your side. You can use your bottom arm as a pillow. You can drape the top arm over your chest or over your legs if you've got your knees up close to your chest. And then when you're ready, use your arm strength. Press yourself up to a seated position. We didn't spend a lot of time seated, so you can either come into a cross-legged position, you could sit with your feet together in a bound angle or butterfly position. Some people even like to sit on their heels, right? So just find a position that's comfortable for you. And this is about sealing in your practice, so do what's perfect for you at this point. And then join me with your hands at your heart. Sit nice and tall. Lift your heart into your hands and bow your head towards your heart. Once again, be grateful to yourself for taking this time to nurture your mind, your body, and your spirit in this practice of yoga. May the benefits of this practice go with you off the mat. May you find inner strength. May you practice gratitude, and may all that give you more joy, ease, and peace. And of course, share that ease and peace with others. Thank you for sharing your yoga practice with me this evening. Namaste.